Ethan Carter adjusted the straps of his worn leather satchel as he walked across the uneven stones of the bustling market. The sun hung high in the sky, making the alien spires of the marketplace shimmer in faint blue and green hues. Merchants from countless worlds shouted their offers over the crowd. Some had 3 arms, some floated slightly above the ground, and some had eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Yet among this chaos, Ethan had a simple goal: buy grain. His small settlement on the dry, harsh planet of Corval had barely enough food to last the coming season, and every sack he could carry mattered. He weaved carefully between stalls piled with jars of glowing spices, bundles of fibrous cloth that shimmered in sunlight, and crates of strange alien fruits that pulsed softly. Each step reminded him of why humans were rare in this corner of the galaxy. Other species had adapted in ways that made surviving here almost effortless. Humans had to rely on wit, courage, and luck, and today Ethan's luck seemed as thin as the dust on the stone paths. At a stall marked with a floating crystal that projected its price in shifting colors, Ethan began haggling with a 6-limbed merchant over a shipment of grain. The alien's voice hissed and clicked, offering numbers Ethan struggled to understand. He frowned, pointing at the sacks, and tried again. After a few minutes, a deal was reached, and Ethan was ready to move on. That's when he heard it. A soft, deliberate whisper carried over the hum of the market. 15 units, not less. She's strong, human, and proud. Rare commodity. Ethan froze. Human in this market? Humans were few and far between, and they were often treated as curiosities, sometimes as property. He followed the voice, ducking behind a stall of floating textiles, and saw a small crowd gathered around a raised platform. On it stood a woman. Her skin was tanned from the sun, and her dark hair fell in a loose braid. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and proud, even as she stood in a place where pride seemed foolish. The crowd's excitement made her presence feel like a spectacle. Who is she? Ethan muttered to himself. She is a human, a trader whispered. A widowed Apache. They say she survived the desert raid and now belongs to no one except those who pay. Ethan's stomach twisted. A human being, treated like a commodity. He had come to this market to trade grain, not people, but something stirred inside him. Curiosity, perhaps, but also a sharp sense of injustice. The woman's gaze swept over the crowd, and he saw no fear, only quiet determination. It was rare to see such strength in someone treated as less than property. The auction began. The alien market master's voice rang out, strange and melodic. Highest offer for the human widow! He gestured dramatically, and the crowd leaned in. Numbers flew. Alien credits, exotic minerals, rare artifacts. Ethan listened, confused and increasingly uneasy. The price was absurd, but what troubled him more was the way the bidder spoke of her, as if her skill, courage, and life were simply goods to be traded. Ethan thought of the grain he had come to buy. He could easily spend that much on food for his people, but he realized that this woman was far more valuable than any shipment of grain. Her strength, intelligence, and dignity were priceless. Before he could overthink, he stepped forward, raising his voice. I'll trade all my grain for her. The crowd froze. Murmurs spread. Some laughed at the audacity. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Ethan felt all eyes turned toward him, both curious and incredulous. The auctioneer tilted his head, a sound like a low chime escaping him. All your grain? Yes, Ethan said firmly. Everything I've brought. The grain is yours. She comes with me. The murmurs grew louder. Some aliens openly mocked him, pointing at his satchel and the sacks of grain. The human dares to trade food for food, one shouted. Another added, She is not your concern. Why risk your supplies for her? Ethan clenched his fists but held his ground. Because she's not a thing. She's a human. She deserves better than this market. She deserves freedom. The auctioneer paused, then glanced at the woman. Nahida's gaze met Ethan's, and for the briefest moment he saw relief in her eyes. Perhaps she had never expected anyone to step forward for her. After what seemed like an eternity, the auctioneer nodded. Very well. The grain is yours to trade. The human widow goes with you. The crowd erupted into a mix of astonished gasps and whispered speculations. Ethan felt a weight lift from his chest. He hadn't planned for this, and yet he knew in some deep way that it was the right choice. He stepped forward, offering Nahida a hand. She hesitated, a flicker of caution in her eyes, then accepted. Her grip was firm, steady. Ethan realized immediately that she was not fragile or broken. She was a survivor. The journey back through the market was tense. Many watched them leave, some with curiosity, others with amusement. Nahida walked silently, her eyes scanning the stalls and the floating merchants as if calculating, assessing, and preparing for anything. Ethan admired her calm and focus. Despite the oddity of their situation, he felt a sense of partnership beginning to form. Once they cleared the market, the chaos faded behind them. They entered the outskirts of the desert, the sands stretching endlessly before them. Ethan led the way, aware of the dangers: predators, sudden sandstorms, and the heat that could sap life from even the strongest human. Nahida finally spoke. Her voice was soft but steady. "You risked much for me," she said. "Why?" Ethan shrugged, unsure how to answer fully. "I couldn't watch them treat you like that. You deserve better. We all deserve better." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slightly. "Then we survived together." As the sun dipped lower, painting the desert in streaks of orange and purple, they began their long trek. Ethan carried what supplies he could, while Nahida adjusted to the harsh terrain with surprising ease. She shared knowledge of desert plants, ways to find water hidden beneath the sand, and how to move without drawing attention from predators. Each lesson deepened Ethan's respect for her. Night fell, bringing cold winds that cut through their clothes. They huddled beside a small dune, using what little fire Ethan could make. Around them, the stars of Corval blazed like scattered jewels, and the silence of the desert felt vast and endless. Ethan glanced at Nahida. Her eyes reflected the firelight, but there was also something else, an unspoken story of loss, resilience, and endurance. He felt both humbled and inspired. He had traded grain for her freedom, yes, but in doing so, he realized he had gained something far greater: the opportunity to witness the strength of the human spirit in its purest form. In that quiet night, they shared their first conversation about their pasts. Ethan spoke of his small settlement, of hard winters and failing crops, of people who depended on him. Nahida shared fragments of her own story, her life before the desert raid, the loss she had endured, and the survival that had brought her here. There was pain, but also determination. Each word, each glance formed a fragile bond between them. As dawn approached, the desert light returning with muted gold and pink, Ethan felt a strange certainty. The journey ahead would be perilous, filled with dangers they could not yet foresee. Yet for the first time in a long while he felt hope, not just for his settlement, but for the human in front of him, and for what they could achieve together. The market, the auction, the trade of grain for life, it was behind them now. Ahead lay a desert that tested every ounce of courage, skill, and resilience. Ethan and Nahida took their first steps together into the rising sun, unaware of the challenges and discoveries awaiting them. Yet both knew one truth: humans, when they choose to act with courage and compassion, could change the course of events in ways no alien market could predict. And so, with every step, the beginning of an extraordinary story unfolded, one that would prove that humanity's greatest strength was not in wealth, not in technology, but in the heart, the will, and the unwavering sense of justice that could guide even the most ordinary human to perform extraordinary deeds. The desert stretched endlessly before Ethan and Nahida, the sands rippling like waves beneath the rising sun. The market and its chaos were far behind them now, replaced by a silence that was almost alive. Every footstep seemed to echo into the vast emptiness. Ethan adjusted his satchel, feeling the weight of responsibility, not just for the grain he had traded, but for the human he had vowed to protect. Nahida walked beside him, her posture tall and confident, yet her eyes constantly scanned the horizon. She seemed to sense dangers that Ethan could not even imagine. The first challenge appeared sooner than either of them expected. A heat haze shimmered in the distance, and the air carried a strange metallic smell. Suddenly, a group of alien raiders appeared, their ships glinting in the sun, kicking up clouds of sand as they approached. Ethan's heart raced. These were not mere market thieves. They were experienced scavengers, likely sent to reclaim the human widow. Nahida moved without hesitation. "Stay close," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge of steel in it. She pointed to a series of dunes that created natural cover. "We use the terrain. They won't expect it." Ethan followed her instructions, dodging behind the dunes and keeping low. Nahida handed him a small blade, one that seemed almost ceremonial but was deadly sharp. "You might need this," she said. "It's better than nothing." The raiders landed near the dunes, their multi-legged exosuits making soft clicking noises in the sand. They called out in alien tones, demanding Nahida's return. Ethan swallowed, gripping the blade tightly. Nahida's gaze met his, and he saw no fear, only focus and strategy. She began moving silently along the dunes, signaling Ethan when to move, when to hide. When a raider approached, Nahida struck with precision, disabling him with a swift, clean move. Ethan watched in awe, realizing she had trained not only to survive but to protect herself in situations that would terrify most humans. Together, they managed to evade the majority of the raiders using the dunes to their advantage. Each step was careful, deliberate, and calculated. By mid-afternoon, the raiders were far behind and the desert returned to its oppressive silence. Ethan's legs ached and the sun burned down on him, but he felt a strange exhilaration. "You're incredible," he said, turning to Nahida. She gave a small smile, almost imperceptible. "You didn't do so badly yourself," she replied. "You followed my instructions." They continued walking, the desert stretching endlessly with only a few patches of hardy vegetation breaking the monotony. Nahida taught Ethan how to find hidden water beneath the sand, which plants were safe to eat, and how to navigate using the sun and stars. Her knowledge was remarkable, and Ethan realized that she had survived not just because of strength, but because of intelligence, patience, and an unbreakable will. That night, they made a small camp in the shelter of a rock formation. The wind whistled through the stones, carrying with it the chill of the desert night. Ethan struggled to start a fire, and Nahida showed him how to use a small lens to focus sunlight during the day to create sparks at night. Once the fire crackled, they shared a simple meal of dried fruits and water. Ethan asked about her past. Nahida's voice was quiet, almost reflective. She spoke of her homeland on Earth before the migration to Korval, the community she had lost, and the raid that took everything from her. There was sorrow in her story, but also resilience. Ethan listened, feeling a deep respect for her survival. In turn, he shared his story of the small settlement he was returning to, the people who depended on him, and the harsh conditions of life on Korval. They spoke late into the night, finding comfort in each other's presence. It was the beginning of a bond forged through trust, necessity, and mutual respect. As dawn broke, painting the desert in muted gold and pink, Ethan and Nahida set off again. The terrain grew more dangerous as they approached a canyon filled with jagged rocks and hidden pitfalls. Nahida led the way, moving gracefully, her knowledge guiding them through paths that Ethan would have thought impassable. Suddenly, the sound of engines roared behind them. Another group of raiders had found their trail. This time, Ethan was ready. He set small traps along the path, using rocks and sand to create noise and mislead the pursuers. Nahida worked alongside him, striking when necessary, ensuring that no harm came to either of them. Their combined effort was seamless, a dance of strategy and survival. After hours of tense evasion, the raiders finally gave up, unable to navigate the traps and terrain effectively. Ethan exhaled, his body trembling from exhaustion and adrenaline. Nahida placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're learning," she said with a hint of amusement. Ethan smiled weakly. "Only because you're teaching me." Finally, they reached the edge of the desert. Beyond it lay the small human settlement Ethan had left weeks before. The sight of familiar buildings, simple stone structures surrounded by sparse fields, filled him with relief. Nahida looked at the settlement with curiosity, noting the simplicity and resilience of human life on a harsh planet. When they entered, the villagers stared in astonishment. A human widow, long thought lost, had returned, escorted by Ethan, who had traded his grain for her freedom. Some villagers whispered, others openly stared, but the pair did not falter. Ethan led Nahida to the central hall, explaining how he had found her and the dangers they had faced together. The settlement quickly realized that Nahida's knowledge was invaluable. She showed them new ways to cultivate crops in the harsh soil, locate hidden water, and defend themselves against predators. Slowly, she became a respected member of the community, not as someone who had been bought, but as a partner and teacher. Ethan and Nahida worked side by side, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. She admired his courage, quick thinking, and unwavering sense of justice. He admired her intelligence, calm in danger, and determination to survive. Together, they proved that humans, even in the most hostile environments, could adapt, thrive, and protect one another. Months passed. The fields began to flourish, The settlement grew stronger, and the villagers learned to rely on both Ethan and Nahida. Their story spread to neighboring communities, a tale of courage, compassion, and the triumph of human spirit over adversity. One evening, as the twin moons of Corval rose over the desert, Ethan and Nahida stood on a hill overlooking the settlement. The wind whispered through the sparse trees, carrying the scent of blooming desert flowers. Ethan turned to her. "We survived the market, the desert, the raiders, and we're still standing. That's humanity for you." Nahida smiled, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Humans are stubborn," she said softly. "But that's why we survive. We fight, we protect, we endure. That is who we are." Ethan nodded. He realized that the market, the trade, and the dangers they had faced were more than just survival. They were proof that the human spirit could triumph in even the most unlikely circumstances. The settlement thrived, and their bond became a symbol of hope. Ethan had gone to the market to buy grain, but he had returned with something far more valuable: a human life saved, a friend forged in adversity, and a story that would inspire generations. And in the quiet of the desert night under the twin moons of Corval, both Ethan and Nahida understood the unspoken truth. Humanity's greatest strength was not in what they owned or harvested, but in the courage to act, the compassion to protect, and the unwavering will to survive together.